Let's look at the different types of glands found in your skin. This is a pretty thorough table. You'll notice that I've underlined some of the more pertinent information. We're going to look at kind of what these glands look like on the next image. So this is largely the information, and then we should be able to identify them on the next slide. So we have the oil glands, sweat glands, and the ceruminous glands that produce earwax. Sebaceous glands are the glands that produce oil. You'll notice down here that oil is known as sebum. Sebum is a mixture of triglycerides, cholesterol, there's some proteins in there, and some inorganic molecules. The function of sebum is numerous. One is to prevent drying out of the skin and hair. It also helps prevent water loss from the skin, keeps the skin soft and not brittle. But it also is involved in inhibiting growth of certain bacteria. So it helps prevent an overgrowth of bacteria on the skin. Where are they located? Well, these glands are always, or I should say mostly, connected to hair follicles. And when we look at the image, we'll see that if you find a hair follicle, quite often there are these glands that are sticking off of that follicle. Therefore, the sebum is secreted into the follicle with the hair. So as the hair grows up through the follicle, that oil follows it up so that hair maintains its oily texture. These glands are often not particularly active early on in life and childhood, but they are activated more at puberty. Next one are the two sweat glands, or sudoriferous glands. The sudoriferous glands are found throughout the body. The more common sweat gland are known as eccrine sweat glands. These are found especially on the forehead, palms, and soles of the feet. They are responsible for cooling the body. They're found in areas like the forehead in order to cool the brain. We don't want our brain to overheat. Their glandular portions are found deep in the dermis, and then the sweat duct actually extends all the way to the surface of the epidermis. The secretion we often call perspiration, largely water, a very watery secretion. There are some salts in there and some waste. So quite often if the body has a lot of something, it can be secreted and found in sweat. Some examples include urea, which is a waste product produced by your liver, uric acid, a little bit of ammonia. Sometimes if you consume certain meals that are rich in garlic, you might find some garlic in the sweat. If someone drinks excessive amounts of alcohol, some of that alcohol can be found in sweat. But the major component is water, and the major function of that is to regulate body temperature. When water evaporates, that removes a lot of heat from the body. And we have these functioning pretty quickly after birth. The next type of sweat gland are called apocrine sweat glands. Apocrine has to do with how that sweat's made. The sweat is actually produced in the cell, but then pieces of the cells become part of the sweat. So this sweat happens to be a little more viscous, a little thicker than sweat produced, say, on your forehead. This sweat often is delivered into a hair follicle, kind of like sebum is. It's not secreted right onto the surface of the epidermis. These sweat glands are found just in specific areas of the body. You've got a lot of them in your armpits, your axillary regions, in your groin, the areola of the nipple, bearded regions of the face, the clitoris, and the labia minora, which are parts of the female external genitalia. The material produced is still called sweat. It's still called perspiration. It just has more components. It's got a little bit of lipids, some fat in there, and it has some proteins. And what happens is bacteria actually like this stuff. So this sweat happens to have some nutrients that bacteria will feed on. And when the bacteria feed on these nutrients, they give off odors. So that's why your armpits tend to have an odor to them. It's because of the bacteria feeding on this type of perspiration. These glands are a little more sensitive to stress, emotional stress, and sexual excitement. Eccrine sweat glands are also stimulated a little bit with emotional sweat. So if you were giving a big speech in class, you've probably found that you definitely sweat more at your armpits, and you might even sweat on your forehead. That's because both of these are stimulated in times of sweat. The apocrine glands are just a little more sensitive to those situations. And these definitely are not very active until someone reaches puberty. The fourth type of gland are the ceruminous glands. Cerumen is a waxy material we call earwax because these glands are specifically located in the external auditory canal. And this material, the function is to kind of coat that canal with a sticky material. So any kind of material that might float into the ear canal will stick to this material and it will not enter the ear. So it's used to protect you. It's kind of scary to think that insects might crawl into your ear canal, but if they do, hopefully they stick into this earwax. And these function pretty quickly after birth. So these are the four types of glands. We should know a little bit about each of them, both their secretion as well as their function. This next slide is going to show us what they look like on this drawing. The only gland that's not shown on here are the ceruminous glands. But you'll notice that we've got a couple hair follicles shown on this drawing. Here's a hair, and then surrounding that hair would be the hair follicle. And coming off of that hair follicle is a sebaceous gland. So here's the sebaceous glands here and here, producing that sebum that travels up with the hair. There's another two sebaceous glands attached to this hair follicle over here. You'll notice they're kind of bulbous looking, and they always have a little short duct that attaches them to that hair follicle. Deeper down in the dermis, you'll see the two sweat glands. These kind of coiled tubes are the secretory portion. These are the portions that actually produce the sweat. You'll follow the sweat duct of the eccrine sweat gland, and it'll go right to the surface where there's a sweat pore. The apocrine sweat gland tends to be a little larger. It doesn't quite show it here, but the secretory portion's a little larger. And often that sweat duct will attach to the hair follicle. So notice it doesn't extend to the surface like the eccrine sweat gland, but it puts its sweat into that hair follicle, kind of along with the oily sebum. So that's our discussion of glands. The last video is going to talk about some pathologies like skin cancer and burns.